Hey everyone, welcome to US Daily Beat. It's Sunday, July 26th, 2026, and I'm so glad you're here. We've got some really interesting stories for you today. More than 300,000 flee wildfires in France and Spain. Trump takes swipes at press during White House Correspondents Dinner. Rental searches for pet-friendly properties drop after law change. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's get into it. All right, let's kick things off with world news. If you've been following the heat wave in Europe, this is the scary part of the story. More than 300,000 people have had to leave their homes in parts of France and Spain as fast-moving wildfires keep spreading through tinder-dry land. In Spain, the Prime Minister is warning that the next few hours could be especially difficult, and that's usually a sign that firefighters are still very much in damage control mode. In southwestern France, officials say they are still far from getting the blazes near Bordeaux under control. That area has been dealing with intense heat and dry conditions, which can turn a spark into a disaster in a matter of minutes. And once fires start moving in this kind of weather, they can jump roads, threaten neighborhoods, and overwhelm local resources fast. Why should we care? Because this is not just a local emergency anymore. It's part of a bigger pattern of extreme weather making wildfires more frequent, more dangerous, and harder to stop. The big thing to watch next is whether temperatures ease and whether crews can finally get a stronger line around these fires before more people are forced to run. Now let's talk about world news. Last night's White House Correspondents Dinner was supposed to be a celebration of press freedom and the role of reporters in a democracy. And that context mattered a lot because the event had been canceled before, after a deadly shooting in April. So this wasn't just another political roast night. It carried a heavier meaning, with journalists, public figures, and guests gathering in Washington after a year marked by real concern about violence and the pressures facing the press. And then, former President Donald Trump took some sharp swipes at the media, which honestly is not exactly a surprise if you've watched his style over the years. He used the moment to go after reporters and the way coverage has been handled, turning what's usually a mix of comedy and commentary into another round of political sparring. For you and me, the bigger story is what this event represents. The ongoing tension between politicians and the press, and how that relationship keeps shaping public trust. What to watch next is whether these clashes stay on the dinner stage or spill even further into the 2024 political conversation. Okay, moving on to business and finance. If you've noticed fewer people searching specifically for pet-friendly rentals lately, there's a reason, and it has to do with a recent change in the rules. Agents are saying some renters now assume that if a property is advertised as pet-friendly, they're automatically guaranteed permission to move in with a cat or dog. But that's not quite how it works. The background here matters. In many markets, laws and rental practices have been shifting to make life a little easier for tenants with pets, but that doesn't mean every landlord has to say yes to every animal in every situation. What seems to be happening is that the wording around pet policies is creating confusion. So instead of people searching more confidently, some renters may be backing off or checking fewer listings because they think the legal side is already settled, when it may not be. And why should we care? Because pets are a huge part of housing decisions. If buyers and renters don't understand the rules, they can waste time, miss out on suitable places, or get disappointed later in the process. The key thing to watch next is whether agents, landlords, and rental platforms make the rules clearer so everyone knows exactly what pet-friendly really means. Now let's talk about business and finance. If it feels like more people at work are talking openly about ADHD, that's not just your imagination. Diagnoses have risen in recent years, and that's nudging workplaces to rethink how they hire, manage, and support people. And honestly, that matters to all of us, whether we have ADHD ourselves, think we might, or work alongside someone who does. The big shift is that ADHD is no longer being treated as some rare, personal issue hiding in the background. More employees are asking for things like clearer deadlines, fewer surprise changes, written follow-ups, and work that's broken into smaller steps. For bosses, that can mean moving away from a one-size-fits-all style of management and towards something a little more flexible and a lot more human. Why should you care? Because this is really about productivity, retention, and whether work is designed for real people or idealized robots. The companies that adapt may keep more talent. The ones that don't could lose it. And as awareness grows, the next question is whether workplaces are just talking about inclusion or actually building it into the day to day. Next up, we've got a story from technology. This is one of those stories that sounds like science fiction until you realize it's very much about the world we're already living in. Hugging Face says a recent hack was carried out at what they described as superhuman speed by an AI, with little or no human guidance. That's the big reason people are paying attention. Now, to be clear, the claim doesn't mean we have a runaway robot mastermind. What it does suggest is that attackers may be using AI to automate parts of a hack in ways that are faster, more scalable, and harder to spot than the old school version. If that's true, it matters because speed is power in cybersecurity. The faster an intruder can probe, adapt, and move, the less time defenders have to react. And that's where this gets personal for all of us. You don't need to run a company to feel the ripple effects. If AI can help break in more efficiently, then banks, hospitals, schools, and everyday apps could all face more sophisticated attacks. What we should be watching next is whether investigators confirm this really was AI-driven, or whether the story is being used to send a warning about where cybercrime is heading. All right, so in technology, if you tried to hop onto your PlayStation and it just would not cooperate, you were definitely not alone. Thousands of gamers ran into trouble when PlayStation Network went down, and for a while, people couldn't reliably launch games, open apps, or use network features the way they normally would. That kind of outage can be especially frustrating because it stops you right at the door. Whether you were trying to jump into an online match, stream something, or just play a game that still wants to check in with the network. The good news is that the outage has now been resolved, so things should be back to normal for most players. And if this feels familiar, it's because online gaming has become so connected that even a short service hiccup can affect a huge number of people at once. We're not just talking about multiplayer anymore either. So many games and apps depend on the network for sign-ins, updates, and basic access. What we'll be watching next is whether Sony explains what caused the problem and whether there are any lingering issues for players still having trouble getting back online. And before I let you go, one last story from politics. If you've ever wondered what the first week in Downing Street actually looks like, this is the kind of access that gives us a real window into it. Laura Kuenssberg has been following Andy Burnham behind the scenes as he settles into his first days as Prime Minister. And that means we're not just hearing the polished speeches and the doorstep sound bites. We're seeing the pressure, the quick decisions, and the sheer pace of it all. For viewers, the big context here is that a change at the top of government is never just about one person moving into a new office. It's about how quickly that leader can build a team, set priorities, and convince the country they're in control. In those first few days, every meeting matters, every media appearance matters, and even small missteps can shape the public mood. That's why this behind-the-scenes look is worth paying attention to. It can tell us a lot about Burnham's style, the people around him, and the tone of the government he wants to run. And from here, the real question is simple. Does the early momentum turn into something lasting? And that's it for today's US Daily Beat. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. If you found this helpful, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss tomorrow's episode. I'll be back with more news in the morning. Until then, take care, and I'll see you tomorrow.